Hey everybody, and thanks for tuning in to the Ephrata Community Church weekly podcast. Conversation with our pastors and leaders meant to continue encouraging you to know God, know freedom, know purpose, and make a difference.
Hey, I'm Jim Merman, teaching pastor here at Ephrata Community Church. We're thrilled to have you with you.
It is so good to be back with you. Happy No Longer Fasting Day.
I know, that was it. That might have been the fasting delay.
That's probably what it was, yeah.
Yep, our protein levels were low and
But they're rising.
They are. Rising. We're on the rise, that's for sure. Hey, we are thrilled to be with you. We want to chat a little bit about this past weekend we just had, whether you were able to be a part of it or not. What a wonderful time between two events.
Yes.
Mark Verkler, 4 Keys on Hearing the Voice of God. Amazingly great conference. People came from Alabama, all over the place. It was exciting.
Yeah, I agree. It was very exciting. Really appreciated what Mark brought here to the church. If you weren't there, you could catch the weekend service on Sunday where he talked about having mountain-moving faith, and just appreciated what he brought to us as a whole congregation, as well as having 400 people registering for a Friday night, all-day Saturday seminar on the 4 Keys to Hearing God's Voice. It was exceptional content. My daughter, who's 8 years old, she was there with us, and it wasn't just my daughter. There was 8 years old and up were encouraged to register.
That's
had
right.
a bunch of kids. It was phenomenal.
Yeah, it was good. And then that dovetailed into something we call our prophetic weekend. Yeah. And I have to tell you, it is one of my favorite weekends, partly because it was one of my most uncomfortable weekends when I first started to come here. Not because I didn't believe in the prophetic. And I want to talk about that a little bit, like where my own journey into seeing these gifts of God at work in the church. But just, I have to admit, I had to just check it out for a little bit and see, man, really a weekend where you can get in line and we trust that God is going to speak. So I want to talk about that particular calling and maybe even anointing that's on Ephrata Community Church in that area. But before I do that, I want to just chat a little bit about what you experienced this weekend. Like, what was it like for you coming off the fast and then being part of these two wonderful events?
Well, with every fast, there's always a greater sensitivity to the Lord, what he's doing, what he's saying, not just for me personally, but we hear testimonies. A testimony coming out of the fast, before the fast we did the podcast, one of the things that God does through fasting is he surfaces, or he brings to the surface things that need to be removed, and there's a grace there to remove it. Fun testimony there. Just heard actually this morning a person who's dealing with some significant anxiety. They were at the tail end of the fast and had a prayer time where in that prayer time just had this very clear vision in their mind of the Lord reaching in and removing all of this black just junk out of her. And the clear word to her in that moment was, I'm clearing you out. I'm removing all the stuff that is built up over time that's developed this level of anxiety in you. And then with that came, now here's a charge, an encouragement, an exhortation to steward well your thought life, right? Because that's where it all accumulated from. Yeah. So, but she's been completely at peace since that moment. Yeah. It's just significant. The fasting is so powerful. It's fun to have done it as a corporate body. Yeah. And then obviously you brought up the prophetic weekend and just all the prayer teams that we had here represented from ECC. We had Christ Community Church, Gateway House of Prayer, Eastgate House of Prayer, Lifeway Church, and I'm certain there's
Christ
one or
Community,
two.
Global Awakening.
Global Awakening, thank you. They were a huge help. All of these different partners that we had for this weekend was incredible. Ministering to every single person in this church, some more than once, and it was fantastic.
Yeah, and one of the things I love that Matt pointed out, you might remember before we took a break, we did 2 sessions on what fasting was, extended chats, and it was really wonderful. And I learned a lot from those times, sitting with Matt, prepping for him and things. But I do remember Matt saying, hey, we are doing this corporately. In the same way that Joshua and Caleb, even though they were right with God, could not go into the promised land until the corporate body had some kind of movement within it. We were believing that. So whether or not you were able to fully engage with the fast or not, if you showed up for this past weekend, you got to eat of some of the fruits and the goodness that took place. And I just want to give a testimony from myself. I deliberately went into the fast. When I say deliberately, I didn't have a sense of discernment I was after or anything trying to break through that I was after. I just simply wanted to make more space for God and observe myself, because you learn a lot about yourself in the midst of a media fast and in a food fast. But all that to say, I have to say, when I began to pray, I was part of the prayer teams. We had in most services, we had upwards of 15 to 20 prayer teams mobilized for this. When I went to pray for people, I am telling you, within a split second, with even I think maybe one out of maybe the 20 people or 20 families I prayed with, maybe 25. I think there might have been one where it was like 15 seconds of like having to really pause. But I'm telling you, the Lord was speaking. So it was really beautiful to see 20 to 25 families be the direct benefit of a community that cultivated the space for God to show up. Not just an individual, but I think I heard this testimony across. God was speaking, and there was some really powerful stuff spoken over people. So
yeah, well, you mentioned at the beginning. Why don't you fill us in? Why was the prophetic weekend or your experience the first time your
almost
aversion
awkward
to it? Yeah, so fill us in, because there's potentially a lot of people that visited for the first time here because it was this weekend.
That's right.
And, perhaps somebody watching can associate or have similar things.
Yeah, well, just so you know, I want to fill you in. Like I told Matt, I want to talk about this one thing that's been on my heart. I grew up in a church that you'd have to call what I call it a soft cessationist. In other words, we didn't have the guts to say we didn't think the Spirit was still at work like in the New Testament.
Yeah.
Book of Acts, Jesus' ministry. We would never say that same Spirit wasn't at work like maybe a cessationist church would do. But we certainly didn't know how to operationalize it. And we were more afraid of the abuses that could happen around the power gifts, revelatory gifts, signs and wonders gifts. We were more concerned about how to steward them well, not to hurt people. So we actually almost buried the talent. Dare I say that, as a community. Looking back on my early, and by the way, wonderful brothers and sisters, I am not in charge of the gate of heaven. So these are all beautiful brothers and sisters in Jesus. It's just, I'd like to suggest they were burying a talent, right? So to be a part of a community that says, you know what, we not only believe this is at work, we believe it's as active as us preparing our hearts, and that any single person that could come can be a part of it. And I just want to speak to how much that's meant to me, not only to be a part of a church that believes the Lord is doing this, but there is a true anticipation that we're carrying toward it. And that has been attractive, and the more I have given myself over to it. Now, you might sit and think, Jim, you're one of the pastors. What do you mean the more you give? Truthfully, the more you see God showing love like this, you give him a little more trust on being willing to step toward it, even as a leader in the community. And I am so thrilled to be a part of the community, and I keep seeing God showing up, right?
Yeah, he keeps doing that. It's just, testimonies are starting to come out of this weekend, a lot of powerful moments, and it's a beautiful weekend. I love that we do it every year. I love that we can minister to people that are coming from outside of the ECC community. Will be a part of this weekend. So it's just a beautiful thing.
And I want to speak to some of us in our community that might have had hesitancy. I had a time on Saturday night where I had a chance to speak to someone who's been attending here for about 18 months. They are clearly a husband and wife that are great, deep followers of Christ historically. But he took the time to pause and goes, hey, I can't tell you how much Effort of Community has meant to us over the last 18 months to 2 years, because this community has helped us to really start to believe that we can hear the voice of God, and we can actually act and live in a consistent encounter with a living God daily. And I just want to say how exciting that is, and just remind those of us that are still nervous about that. God is still doing what he did. And the best way to explain this is, do you know the book of Hebrews where it lists the great people of faith? And he lists all the way from Abram through Rahab, Samson, Jephthah. And then all of a sudden you have that great verse, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses. And I want to remind you, if God was doing different things in different dispensations to different people, you can't put a verse like that in the Bible. You can't sit and say, Jim, since you're surrounded by this cloud of witnesses, run the race with endurance, laying aside everything, because you can't compare me to someone who's operating under a different governance of God, right?
That's right.
So there is something about the fact that our God is consistent. How God shows up might have some contextual fun aspects to it of what the way Abram was engaging with faith, but it is the same faith I'm being asked to engage with in the year 2022. And so therefore, I'm believing God is doing what he's always done.
Yeah.
And it's almost our availability that seems to be God's issue.
Yeah. And perhaps you're watching and you were a part of this weekend, or maybe you were on a team and it was kind of maybe the first time you either experienced it or stepped out and giving a prophetic word. But I'd encourage you to keep exercising that gift or giving energy to honing it or strengthening it, which looks a lot like you're at a Connect group meeting and just being like, hey, why don't we pause right now as a Connect group and just pray for one another and see what the Lord would say, or you're out in the marketplace. I'd encourage you, because God, what he did here obviously is beautiful. We invited him to do so. People came expectant for it. So the faith level is there. But man, it's beautiful to have it here for a weekend, and then it's kingdom and purposeful, like God's purpose on the earth is for it to go out into the marketplace, and for people to go out of this weekend and take it.
It's lifestyle,
exactly.
man. It's lifestyle. And I want to, if you don't mind me, I want to segue to lifestyle, because this coming weekend, we're moving into what we call our Take One Step weekend. And I just want to remind you, in the kind of calendar yearness of being a community, we just moved from what could be called almost a big conference or a big experiential weekend around our prophetic. And this coming week, we're pivoting now to, Lord, hey, that's neat. But we need to now to talk about the kind of discipleship that creates resiliency and long-term realities in your life, right? Yep. So we are very deliberately not a conferencing church. Now, we probably host more things than most places simply because, you have something like the Hearing God's Voice with Mark Verkler. We have William Wood coming up. We have Mike Hutchins on healing from Summit, post-traumatic, right? And we had the HarvestNet Summit. So, of course, you could say like, wow, you have a lot of events that people might come into town for. But we quickly pivot back to our community to say this: those are merely like the festivals and the joyous moments in the Hebrews calendar year, but we are ultimately a tribe that's journeying toward what's it mean to be conformed to the image of Christ. And that gets back to what Take One Step is. So you could come off of a weekend like we just have, and we hope you did, but the next question is, oh Lord, what is the next step you want me to step into? So I'm pretty excited about this weekend for sure.
Yeah, so I love this weekend as well. It's an opportunity just to really showcase all the discipleship offerings that we have here, Connect groups, growth groups, ICL, the Embark internship. And after the service, having the groups fair where we have all these tables set up and people can just mill around and talk with the leaders who are leading them, discover more information about them. The Gospels ICL course, for example.
Introduction to counseling.
Yeah,
Great
exactly.
stuff.
So it's going to be a fun weekend and really looking forward to it. And after this weekend, the spring semester kicks off. Groups begin in the next week or two, and it's just a fun time. And as you said, it's really important that people do take one step. In fact, there is always one step that every single person can take. And it's not just about signing up for a class. I mean, we have serve teams that are made available if people want to.
It's a great way to begin your engagement.
Exactly. Take a step by simply serving in the cafe team or on the worship team, like the AVL team. Like there's opportunities to serve in the community with different ministries that we partner with. Like there's a number of ways that people can say, you know what, I can't do that, but there is one thing I can do. And for some, it could be as simple as baptism. We have baptism in a couple weeks.
Oh, that's a huge step.
Well, yeah. Exactly. I say simple, but it's like it's a one.
Oh no, yeah.
Anyway, it's huge. It's such an important step, and so it's like here are the things we're offering, but at the end of the day, the whole point of the Take One Step weekend is pause and reflect with the Lord and say, God, what step would you have me take this spring semester that I'm purposeful and engaging my walk with Jesus and trusting His Spirit will meet me, empower me, and lead me, and that I'll be changed.
That's right.
And not the same.
If I may be so bold as to ask, would you pray for me this week? I'm speaking this weekend, and I am asking God for the gift to take young or old in the faith and inspire us all into what is a step we can take. Whether you've been in this faith for a long time, I think of Beverly Hoffman sharing a testimony a couple weeks ago. Here's a woman of God she was being understated in the depth of ministry she moves in, and then God says to her, I need you to do Embark. And she admitted it was a little curious. She said it seemed like something that I had nailed down in my life some time ago. But I am believing that wherever you're at in the faith, brand new to it, admitting you're stalled, even potentially stuck in a besetting sin all the way out to long term, I'm going to ask the Holy Spirit to be speaking to us about what is the step that we can be taken. Because I think as we collectively move, I think we're going to see something beautiful going on. I agree. That's understated, but I just think it's pretty excited. So we are really, really looking forward to having you out. Now, in the meantime, please go to the website and click on Take One Step.
Yeah.
And everything Matt just shared with you is going to be in a drop-down menu. Start checking it out. Maybe a 6-week growth group's for you.
Yeah.
Maybe an 8-week Institute for Christian Learning course is good for you. Maybe it's time to have a connection with the Connect group, or even do Connections Pathway. I think that's all good. What do you think?
Nope, sounds good to me. I encourage that wholeheartedly.
Yep, let's do it. Well, we hope you have a wonderful week, and remember, you're likable.
Yeah, God bless.
Bye.
Hey, thanks again for joining us today. We hope that you've been encouraged by listening and that you'll join us again next week. You can listen to previous episodes, find additional resources, and of course, learn more about us by visiting EphphatACommunityChurch.com.